Welcome to Essential Ingredients, powered by NextGen Purpose. EI serves up thoughtful conversations with industry leaders and pioneers who support a regenerative future for our food system. The stories shared by our guests are meant to spark curiosity and inspire informed global change. Good morning and welcome to Essential Ingredients. I'm your host, Justine Reichman. Today with me, I'm very pleased to introduce Lars Langhout, CEO and co-founder of NoPalm Ingredient. Welcome, Lars.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm so pleased to finally arrive here with you. We had a little trouble getting here, but we've managed. Time difference, challenges, all life. So I'm so glad that we finally were able to get here. Thank you.
Likewise.
So Lars, I'm pleased. I'm so excited to learn a little bit more about what you do and introduce you to our community so they can learn a little bit more about NoPalm Ingredients and about you.
Great.
So
more than happy to.
So before we get off into our conversation, I always like to have our guests just introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what it is they do. And for you, I'd love for you just to introduce you and what NoPalm Ingredient is.
Yeah, so I'm Lars Langhout, CEO and co-founder of NoPalm Ingredients. Born and raised in the Netherlands. By education, I have a business background, my MBA at Columbia Business School. And
Did you say Columbia? Did you say
Yeah.
Columbia? In New York?
Yeah.
Oh, so you traveled. Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
And basically, I had a career in strategy consulting, so worked domestically and abroad. But I also wanted to have more of an impact from a sustainability perspective specifically. And in 2020, I basically, in the COVID period, decided to quit my job because I was pursuing an entrepreneurial career. And in the meantime, I'd met my co-founder, Jeroen Hugenholz, who back then was a professor at the University of Wageningen in the Netherlands. And this is a university focused around biology, chemistry. And in our discussions, we identified the opportunity there is for NoPalm Ingredients. Because what we're doing with NoPalm Ingredients is we're trying to solve the palm oil problem. Palm oil is bad because of a number of things. First of all, with the production of palm oil, a lot of carbon emissions are released in our atmosphere because rainforest is being cut down or burned down, which releases a lot of these carbon emissions. But also with the refinement and the transportation of palm oil across the globe, there are a lot of carbon emissions involved. And secondly, the palm oil plantations are monoculture, which basically means rows and rows, endless rows of palm oil trees, which is not a good habitat for animals. And it happens to be that the rainforest is the habitat of a lot of endangered species. So that's a big issue as well. And the third thing from the palm oil issue is that a lot of the local population involved in the production of palm oil is also basically, pressured by the large corporates owning those plantations. So there's a lot of intimidation, a lot of land grab. So there are a few number of things that qualify palm oil as a really big issue globally. So what's the solution? That's what my co-founder came up with, is microbial oil. And it's basically an oil we create by fermenting waste streams. And we don't like to say waste streams. We prefer to say side streams, but I always need to introduce this a little bit. Otherwise, people are like, what are you talking about? What side streams? So, but in the further discussion, I'll continue with side streams. So there can be anything from potato peels, rejected vegetables, brewer's spent grain, as long as it contains sugars, fatty acids, or alcohols. Right, so it's one of the benefits of our solution is that it's widely applicable to side streams, for example, in the Netherlands, but it can be US-based side streams, it can be Japanese side streams. It's possible with everything. And what we do is we ferment those side streams with a homogeneous yeast, and that yeast, like brewing beer, eats the sugars and converts it into oil rather than alcohol. And then we squeeze out the oil, which brings us with a an oil that has similar characteristics to palm oil and therefore can be replaced as an ingredient in food, cosmetics, and detergents. And this is a wonderful solution because our oils are also widely applicable. I mean, we can have certain fractions of the oil so that it can be used in different kind of products. And the third thing, I mean, it's already quite circular what we're doing because we're using these side streams, but 90% of the feedstock we put into our process is a side stream from our process. But the benefit we have is that it's worth more in terms of value because protein is one of the byproducts of our production process. So at the moment, it's mostly animal feed companies buying these side streams, and we can sell that back to them. But in the future, and we're already seeing that happening, other companies, mostly startups at the moment, are interested in our byproducts because it can be an essential ingredient.
I just want to break this down so that we can have a little bit of a conversation and really understand your story so that people can see what inspired you. This is amazing. You built this impact-driven business to solve a problem that gives back to the environment and allows people on a daily basis to use products for themselves that are better for them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and you started off at Columbia Business School in New York, where I'm from. So I always love to, hear people's experience on that. And you found your co-founder back in the Netherlands when you were consulting, right? Doing strategy consulting, is that correct? Were you at like one of the big agencies like Bain or PwC or something?
I worked at Strategy End, which is part of PwC.
Okay, I used to work at PwC 100 years ago. So, you were in a completely different world, right?
Yeah.
It's a fun world. I mean, I liked doing strategy consulting, but it's a completely different animal, right? And I'm curious,
Certainly.
When you were at, Columbia, I know that they do degrees in sustainability. Was your degree, was it in one of the sustainability master's programs, or was it strictly a business degree and it did not, was it not part of that sustainability program?
It wasn't part of the sustainability program. So it was your regular MBA basically. But when I was there in 2015, 2016, there were a lot of things already going on around the Green Business Club and speakers from companies that were having a real purpose at the core of their business. And I remember Ethan Brown from Beyond Meat speaking at Columbia. Back then, Beyond Meat wasn't that popular or known to the wider public, so it was quite a small audience. But his story made a profound impression on me in basically the journey he had and where he got to. And that's one of the moments during my MBA career at Columbia that I realized that I wanted to do something on the crossroads of having a commercial role, but also making a real impact.
That's wonderful, because I wonder, when people are getting their MBAs and they're studying to do these different amazing things, what the crossroads is for them to be able to, or make that decision that they want to create an impact-driven business. Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, when I applied for Columbia, I had a real different journey in mind. I wanted to focus on retail and consulting, and that went overboard within like the first 2 months. It's like a stereotypical MBA story, but meeting so many inspiring people, both classmates, professors, speakers, made me realize, and the time also to reflect made me realize I wanted to have a real impact and be really purpose-driven. So that was a nice experience to undergo through. Yeah.
And so from Columbia, you then went back to the Netherlands, where you then got this job. And so you got this job and it wasn't necessarily purpose-driven, was it?
No, it wasn't. But I was basically returning to my employer. So
They sent
after,
you for the MBA, yeah?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
it's part of the career trajectory at consulting firms in the Netherlands, at least the larger ones.
Right. And so when you came back and you realized that your future was going to be different and that you really wanted to change, how did you approach them or your next steps?
Well, when I decided to return to the Netherlands, I also felt that I needed a few years of more experience before I could found a business by myself. I didn't feel ready yet, so what I wanted to learn is to learn the industry, to get to know the industry a bit better, in order to, and also lead teams, and that was something that I hadn't done prior to my MBA, not really. And when I returned, I focused on the consumer retail sector within our firm, which basically meant that I was working for food and beverage companies all the time, both domestically and internationally. And I think that helped me shape my understanding of how these businesses work, how the industry works, who the power has in the value chain. And it also provided me with a great network of companies that I'm still in touch with, and potential customers of our oil, which I think is yeah, crucial in the steps that we're taking at the moment.
Yeah. So, and once you realize that, and you made that pivot, if you will, or that change, that intentional change, so that you could then build the funnel for your future, how did
Mhm.
you make that final leap to now be where you are today?
I think the COVID situation with the lockdown made me reflect and realize that this was actually a blessing in disguise. I mean, don't get me wrong, COVID has been a really nasty experience for a lot of people. But to me, it was a period of rest because I was traveling all the time. I was basically only at home weekends, and now I was there for the entire full week. So, let alone giving up traveling, made me provided me with a lot of time to reflect and realize that I did have the experience I set out to get when leaving my MBA, returning to the Netherlands, and also giving the news around climate change and publications. It really felt to me that this was the right time to make the move. And you just mentioned that it seems years ago that you've worked at PwC. For me, it's the
It was
same. I
like
mean,
2000, by the way. It was years ago.
yeah, it was years ago, but to me, it also already feels like a
A
distant
lifetime.
memory. Yeah, yeah.
So, and why palm oil? Like, how did it come to be for you? Or no palm oil, I should say.
No palm oil. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've throughout my years, I've traveled the world as well, and I've been to Indonesia. I've seen the palm oil plantations, and that was also a profound impression I had. And when talking to my co-founder about the potential opportunities the microbial oil has and why it's a good replacement of palm oil, it was, yeah, basically math was quite easy. This was the opportunity. And that's also a thing I learned at my MBA. It's you need to recognize opportunities that come by. Everybody gets opportunities. It's a matter of recognizing them.
Yeah, it is. And it's also timing. It's seeing what's in front of you. It's being open to change because things change and evolve. And it's
Yeah,
about timing and being there in that moment.
definitely, definitely.
So, you have the no palm oil. Um, how do you see the future? What do you see for your future with no palm oil?
So we're at the moment still at an early stage as a company.
Mhm.
We've been opening up our lab in January, our own lab, because we were doing work at the Wageningen University. And this year everything is centered around scaling up to industrial levels. And yeah, we've basically mapped out the entire journey with milestones to get there. But like the mid to long term idea is that next year we're going to raise a new round of funding and build a pilot factory, and then a year and a half to 2 years after that to build a larger factory. And also worth to mention is that we're thinking about applying 2 different business models. So like the standard classical model where you build a factory, make a product, sell the product, ship the product. Mm-hmm. But our microbial oil has the advantage that it's widely, the technology is widely applicable, mm-hmm. and it's widely applicable in products as an ingredient. And we want to use a licensing model to work with like the larger producers of food and cosmetics to use the side streams on site that they have in their production process, basically their waste, convert their waste on site into our oil that they can then use as a replacement for palm oil. And that would be to us the holy grail, because if we can pull that off, then scaling our technology is limitless, basically.
It sounds amazing. So, and when you kicked off your company, was this something that you self-funded initially, you and your co-founder? Did you go for friends and family? How did you finance this originally? Because it seems like building a lab can be a very expensive endeavor.
Yeah.
And this show is for founders, researchers, and people building a better for you food business. So I ask these questions because I know the people listening will find this very inspiring, and it's really meant to be able to give people access to the information so that as they're building their businesses, they can make more informed choices. So,
happy to share. I'm happy to share. So what we did, it's partially self-funded, but the larger chunk we did. So when we started raising money, we started with friends and family, and that really helped set a base for other external investors to invest in us. And then we reached out to a limited number of venture capital firms.
So you went institutional?
Yeah, we went institutional. So we had several conversations and then decided to go with three firms. Green Creators, ICOS Capital, and Future Food Fund, and then the remainder that we've raised was a financial loan, basically provided by a Dutch bank that invests or loans money to startups like ours in the early stages. At the moment we're also trying to get some grants in the Netherlands that are focused on circularity, sustainability, but that would be an add-on that would allow us to accelerate our progression. But it's a tough journey, especially the first raise is a hard sell, because you don't, especially in biotech, you don't have a real product yet. The benefit we had was that my co-founder already did this at the university. Right. And we had a small sample that at least we could show to our investors what it is, and also the fact that he was a professor at the University of Wageningen. He still is at the University of Amsterdam. Also provided the credibility we needed for our investors that were actually knew that what we were doing,
right?
Rather than just simply having an idea without any material progression.
What would you say the hardest thing or the greatest challenge you had was when you went out to go raise money?
I would say the hardest challenge was convincing people that this is possible on a industrial level. And because nobody's done this before, but there are multiple companies going at this, all with different angles in terms of the reason why they're doing this, how they're doing this. But we're the only ones using waste streams basically as an input. And we had to validate that, and we already knew, but within these discussions, we made the companies validate this with industrial experts. Because when you're meeting with venture capital partners, they mostly don't have the in-depth experience or expertise to ask like these super technical questions.
Mm-hmm.
So you very quickly move to a phase where they're involving their own experts. And I think that was the biggest challenge, because not everybody is familiar with the technology and what's possible.
What do you think set you aside to make it possible for you to raise money? What do you think was your biggest asset?
Me personally?
Yeah, or your vision.
Well, we raised in the Netherlands, which is a completely different environment in terms of startups and the entire startup ecosystem. When looking at the US, I also always think raises are on steroids. If I look at the amount of money raised in the US compared to the Netherlands, if you would have two identical companies in the US, you would raise at least tenfold what you would be able to raise in the Netherlands. But I took some of that with me from New York to Amsterdam, and I'm dreaming big. So I'm not the kind of guy that wants to take it step by step. I paint a picture, a vision of what we can do, what we can achieve, and what we need to achieve. And I think that really helped our discussions, because I was not talking about this year or the next step. I had a real clear path of where we're going to in the next 10 years, rather than the next 24 months, basically.
So if you look at the food industry, what do you see what's new, what's next? What do you see that's new and innovative in the space?
Yeah, so in terms of like trends, obviously alternative proteins is front and center at the moment, but the next trend is alternative fats, because all these plant-based alternatives need protein, that's for sure, but they also need alternative fats. Because when we're focusing on sustainability, you can't state that, hey, I have this plant-based burger, but I'm still using a highly polluting product like palm oil as an ingredient. And there are all kinds of companies now working on alternative fats, and I think that's going to be the next hot topic in a year or two from now.
So before we wrap up, I just want to ask you, there's a lot of companies out there that make palm oil, that make sustainable palm oil, that talk about, how they work with deforestation. I mean, there's a company called Nutiva. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah.
So, can you talk to me a little bit about them? They say that they're doing great things. So I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't believe in sustainable palm oil. It's a bit strange, right? I mean, you've already cut down huge amounts of rainforest and burn it down, and then claim that you're not going to cut down anymore, and therefore it's sustainable. I'm oversimplifying it a little bit, but that's what it is. Because it's not only the sustainability part is not only cutting and burning down rainforest. It's also refinement of oil, because they need to use a lot of chemicals to make this work in food and cosmetics. And secondly, you're still transporting it from Indonesia to the US or to Europe, and there's nothing sustainable about that. So if I compare that with our alternative, which is a local alternative, at least in my vision, I envision that we have multiple factories around the globe, also with customers, so that you create or brew the oil on site, making sure that you don't have any of the transportation anymore, making sure that you don't have to cut down or burn down rainforest anymore. And also the refinement is different, because where these companies use chemicals to get the palm oil tasteless and without a smell, we're using mechanical extraction, and the fermentation process allows us also to play around with the flavor. So we're going to work with our customers to see what's the flavor you actually want. You might not even want a flavorless ingredient. If you're adding additives like an orange flavor or anything, we can work with that.
Right. Wonderful. Lars, thank you so much for joining me. I really
Thanks for
I love
having me.
getting to know you. I love learning your story. And I love learning all about NoPalm ingredients. So
Great.
we look forward to continuing the conversation and following your journey and learning all about what you bring to fruition as time goes on. So
Looking forward, Justine. Thanks for having me.
great. Thanks so much for joining us at Essential Ingredients, and we're here every Tuesday. To learn more about these episodes and access show notes, go to nextgenpurpose.com and choose podcast. If you like this episode, head to Apple Podcasts or your favorite platform to subscribe and leave us a review. Visit the Next Gen Purpose YouTube channel to subscribe to our EI videocast and give this episode a like while you're there. Follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn at Next Gen Purpose, and connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram at Justine_Reichman. Thanks for joining us.